Ahoy! Welcome, everybody, to Fear and Loving, Episode 9, Intersectionality and Unity. It is February 9th, 2021. And I am your host, Ranch. This is Fear and Loving with Ranch. And tonight we're going to talk about how unity affects you. And hashtag challenge fear, show love. We are here to dismantle problematic thinking and to get back to basics. A few of our tenets here at Fear and Loving, unity and intersectionality, avoid groupthink, and our old favorite, logic. And I am Ranch. I am here in Boston, Gonzo journalist. And I am joined by some of my best friends and esteemed colleagues. The artist, presently known as Joe Nice, DJ, producer, scholar, coming at us from North Carolina. We got Kat Wells, sociologist, queer, intersexual, feminist, abolitionist, hailing from Vancouver, Canada. Chris Foltz, a former Republican presidential campaign strategist turned social impact warrior and plant medicine advocate, and my teammate at Sensi Magazine, joining us from his cat rescue compound in the Nevada desert near Las Vegas. We will be joined soon on the show tonight by our friend Rue Johnson, cannabis and music media strategy consultant and hip-hop historian from Denver. This show is a place where we may all have different opinions and come from different sides of politics, but we will be working to find common resolution, as we all need so badly. And I'll give you may be new to the show, and so I'll give you a little mission behind Fear and Loving as well. We were established during 2020's COVID-19 pandemic as a platform to bring together voices who believe in the essential impact of Gonzo journalism and who fight for truth and justice from a compassionate heart center. The platform has a strong focus on anti-corruption, compassionate policy changes, as well as the fight for social justice and equality. And truth through Gonzo is something I've been thinking a whole lot on. And so today in the show, we've learned one thing. If we've learned one thing from 2020, it's that many of us out there in the United States of America and across the world are sadly maybe misinformed, could possibly be ignorant as well. And sometimes it's just due to a really a misunderstanding of terms and definitions. Sometimes it can be that simple, just getting our terms straight, our facts straight. So this week's episode is on two of the most hot button kind of issue or words that involve some of these hot button issues. So words that are often used in this diversity and inclusion conversation. But what are they? What is intersectionality and unity? So we're going to start with a little defining of the terms. I think we all really see value in doing that. So we'll start with, and I pull from Merriam-Webster myself. I plug Merriam-Webster actually. I get checks on a monthly basis. So we'll start with Merriam-Webster. So definition of intersectionality: the complex and cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, such as racism, sexism, and classism, combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experiences of marginalized individuals or groups. Okay. That's what we got from Merriam for intersectionality. And for unity, the quality or state of not being multiple, so a oneness, a definite amount taken as far as one or for which one is made to stand in calculation, a condition of harmony, the quality or state of being one has made. So that's what we got. Very dry there, but we're gonna unmute my friends here to start. Boom! It's like, Chris, what'd you call me? I'm the big brother of the broadcast studio.
You are. You're big blue, big brother, whatever. All I know is you put me in some room. None of us could talk to each other. I survived it, and we did as well. So We have a little PTSD from it, not to depreciate anyone, but
yeah. Well,
those are interesting definitions, Ranch. Where'd you say that they were both from Merriam-Webster?
Both of them. Yep.
I got a question right away.
I can't alter them. I can't go in there and say, well, I think it's this way.
No, I got a question right away. And how much does that definition versus what is happening in the streets and in the actual practice, how much does it actually align? I've never heard the textbook definition before in my life, so that was quite an eye-opening experience to hear that,
Right. Complex cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination combine, overlap, or intersect, especially in the experience of marginalized individuals or groups.
So is that what's being, is that definition accurately represent, Joe, you think?
Well, I think what we need to do is dig a little bit deeper. And Kat and I did an entire episode on our Joe and Kat Chat series called Intersectionality. And I think providing a bit more history with regard to the terminology might provide a bit better of an answer to potentially your question. Now, an African-American law professor, she was actually a law student at the time, named Kimberly Crenshaw. I think she was a law student, I think Kimberly. At Columbia. Yeah. At Columbia University, came up with the term intersectionality. And in fact, it was actually from a paper that she did called Myth-Busting Intersectionality. And she did this paper for one of her law school classes, I think back in 1989. So the word or the term intersectionality is not some new buzzword that people just feel like using because it's the cool thing to do, or as the kids say, it's lit. It's not. This word is old enough to get married, had kids, and it's looking at figuring out how to, retirement possibly, and figuring out their 401k. This word is over 30 years old, but people think
definitely lit.
Well, hey, you know what? Yeah,
and I need its financial planner. That sounds like a great plan right there. But anyway,
straight up. But if anyone is certainly more qualified to discuss intersectionality, certainly Kat would be, because when we did this episode, it was mostly her providing, leading the discussion. So Kat, the floor is yours.
The pressure's on, my goodness.
Pressure's not on. Stop that.
Intersectionality is a term that is near and dear to my heart because of my education as a sociologist, because it really helps to define or describe, I guess, the complexity of the intersections of our identities. And that in of itself we can unpack. But the purpose of that word is to understand the impact of these identifiers, which is in the definition there, in society, in our culture, in life. And so I think it is interesting that you pointed out, Chris, that it's just an interesting thing to hear the definition, because are those words put together being practiced? And I think that the answer is yes and no. And the answer is really complex. And that's as good as I can do right now, because everything's so complex. There are ins and outs of any, lived experience.
Thank you, Kat. And something that I think back to when we gathered together a few weeks ago and decided that this was going to be the February 2021 discussion that we had. And, so I think it's important to reflect on what January was like, let alone last year, but what we have going on in this country socially, and what about the realities that we face and the struggles and kind of what we went through last month. What about that out there? Why do these words matter? Why is it that we need to be educating ourselves around this, and maybe in talking about it and having a conversation, I guess. I feel like it's pretty obvious, but just figured I'd throw that out there.
I guess a question I have is Intersectionality and Unity. Are they is one a means to an end of the other? Is it a cause and effect? Are they related? Is something that's one of my first questions. I was in a conversation with my brother-in-law earlier today, and he is just a a standard American person believes in the principles of America, believes in equality for everyone, I would consider him a perfect example of a stereotype. And I drew attention to the fact, hey, listen, I'm going to be on the show later, and we're going to be talking about intersectionality and unity and all this. And it was almost like I was speaking in Klingon when I said intersectionality. And then I thought to myself, do I even know what this actually means on a day-to-day basis? And although we just talked about this, I guess hearing the definition and then hearing, some of Joe and Kat's work. I mean, if those of you that don't and have not heard some of their broadcasts, please tune into them. It's like a wealth of knowledge, but you feel cooler walking out of it too, right? So when I'm looking at that, and it's almost like it didn't match up, but it did. So, I'm interested in understanding when is the word intersectionality used in society outside of the solving the problem of, racial disparity and everything? Is it used in the workplace? Is it in HR our manuals? Where does it exist?
That's a hell of a question, Chris. And I think the word intersectionality must be paired with another word that we haven't put into this conversation: universality, meaning that that intersectionality has a universal component to it. If intersectionality were something that would be in your house, it would be baking soda. And what I mean by that is you can use baking soda for a variety of uses. You can brush your teeth with it. You can bake cookies with it. You can clean your bathtub and your sink with it. You can use it to ease some pains in your stomach. There's a variety of ways that you could use baking soda. And I think there are also a variety of ways that you can use intersectionality. You can use intersectionality in your social groups, provided you have a diverse social group. You can use intersectionality at your workplace. You can even discuss intersectionality, like you said earlier on, Chris, with a family member. But what I said this in the broadcast that Kat and I did several months back. I said intersectionality happens when you see someone else's struggle in your eyes. That's when you truly have intersectionality, when you can truly understand what someone else is going through and feel what someone else is going through, not only sympathetically, but empathetically. And that is when you truly begin to have intersectionality. It's quite honestly no different than some other buzzwords that we consistently use in our day-to-day jargon or lexicon. We talk about diversity and inclusion. These are just words that people use, but do people understand what diversity and inclusion actually are? Those words have to be lived practices. They just can't be words that you see up on a PowerPoint presentation when Starbucks wants to have diversity training because they mistreated a Black person inside one of their stores. This has to be a lived practice. This has to be a day-to-day situation. And I purposely use the word practice because when you think about some of the social conditions that we have in society, they almost seem as if they are illnesses. And when you have an illness that needs some sort of treatment, you go to a doctor. And a doctor's endeavor or life's work, it's not a job. It is called a practice. And the reason why it is practice is because the doctor works on his or her craft, provided that there is a knowledge base to support the practicing of that craft on a day-to-day basis. So understanding that the word intersectionality can't just be a buzzword or the mot du jour, to use a French phrase, word of the day. It's a lived day-to-day practice. It has to be part of who you are as a human being. And when you get unity, when you combine the struggles together to create a union. That's when you get unity, is when you have people from different backgrounds that share a similar struggle. That is when you have unity. But the intersectionality must happen first before you have unity. Because if you all don't realize that you have a common struggle, there's no reason for people to have uncommon struggles to unite. Because if you don't have something in common with somebody else, there's no reason to unite. So the reason you have unity is to unite based upon a common theme or a common characteristic or a common struggle. So then that common struggle is intersectionality. Intersectionality leads to unity.
Okay. And what was that French term you said?
I said mot du jour.
I know Chris thought you said soup du jour, but
No.
Soup du jour. I was writing in the comments. I was asking what was the soup du jour. I'm sorry.
Well, French onion, vegan.
Always French onion.
You know, I've been thinking a lot because we actually had a conversation about intersectionality on this show last year at one point as well, and I've seen you guys speak on it. So it has been in my mind, and when it first came into my mind, and Kimberly Crenshaw, and I first checked out her the TED Talk by her, it was in the heat of the protest movement last year. You know, the cops, if you remember how they were acting, and the folks out in the streets from BLM. And, you know, it's clear that there's certain groups that totally can easily find intersectionality to get out there in the streets and like protest in that way. But really what we need to find is the intersectionality that's elusive, I think, which is the one that is keeping like these disparate groups, these two sides that are hating on each other in this country right now, which is just blatantly happening. Something often, which, I mean, it seems to be a black and white sort of thing, at least sometimes. And when I think about the, people of any race in this country, any background, and I try to think of like, what is our intersectionality? It's pretty simple. And I'm reminded of why we really started the protest movement, and the Occupy movement. And I continually bring this up, but it seems to just be kind of like an afterthought, which is there is intersectionality in the classism that we are feeling, the discrimination in classism. And if we can find more ways to be loud about that and to help people see that like we're all being beaten down by the misinformation, by the mega rich, by the political elite that are corrupt. Like these are a few things that it doesn't matter if you're wearing a MAGA hat or a BLM shirt, like we're getting fucked, straight up. Like, and we have been, and it's blatant. And like, and it's just like, I think that there's gotta be ways that we can, that's why I like the anti-corruption movement. Cause it's like, if I was super far right, and I really wanted to drain the swamp or whatever, then I probably should learn about anti-corruption and find some local, local politicians who are anti-corruption and get on that board. And maybe they are far right, but there's a far left anti-corruption. So it's just, you see what I'm saying? And I think there's something there. Otherwise, I don't know. I'm missing how we bring particularly the racists into the picture here, because I saw somebody post today. They shared something on Facebook that was like about reforming the people that got in trouble at the Capitol riots. Like, okay, yes, maybe that's even part of their reform is that they have to go through some sort of program to try to help them. Like
RA, like Riots Anonymous or something.
Yeah, they tried turning like homosexuals against it's like trying to flip the switch. So some people are like, don't even give them that chance. I'm sorry. I see you, Kat. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say there is no switch to flip. I'm so sorry, but you know the people are talking about. Those crazy, they like reformers. We'll reform it out of you or something. So I think they're talking about reforming this kind of like in QAnon-y kind of whatever mania out of people, and then other people are like, oh, don't even give them a chance. But that's not me. I'm all about like the craziest of us, the most, the ones we're afraid of, figuring out some way to get through to them so they can see that this is a better life for them and their family. This is a better way to be.
You said afraid, Richard. And that's the thing, right? You just said afraid. I think there's a lot of fear that drives us, not the fear that a lot of people think of, right? When I say the fear, like here's an example. When I first heard, and again, I'm going to probably say it wrong, BIPOC, BIPOC, I kid you not, I thought this was like some sort of new rapper, right? That somebody was a spinoff Tupac, right? BIPOC, whatever. And I'm in touch, my finger's on the pulse with a lot of things. I mean, it was a while before I'm like Black, Indigenous, people of color, right? So there is this lexicon. And I think, Joe, you talk about this often. It's kind of like a disconnect between a language. In the progressive movement, in almost all formats, there's a lot of acronyms in there. Language moves very hot, a lot of new things. And it's almost like, it's like going to an Ivy League school that you always feel that you missed the class the day before you had the test, right? So you always feel that you're behind. And I think some people are so scared of this that they often create their own syntax, their own lexicons, their own QAnons, and things of this nature to kind of make up for this deficit. And, I'm in a lot of interesting rooms. I'm in this Institute of Real Growth, where everything's about humanized growth. I'm in this group with polymaths and all this, where some of the smartest, most diverse minds on the planet. And the perplexity is extremely strong in some of these rooms, where even then they're having logical conversations about definitions where nobody wants to offend anyone, but people genuinely don't understand. So please, somebody, let's even BIPOC. First of all, am I saying that correctly? Is it BIPOC? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, now I understand it's Black, Indigenous, people of color, right? Does that include brown, historically, Hispanic, Latinx populations? What is in BIPOC? What is not? So things like that help us to then understand intersectionality and unity, because I know unity is not just about photo shoots where you have somebody that's Black hugging somebody that's white, and then a poster goes up and it says unity and everybody celebrates. That's what marketing unity is, or the theory of unity. But the real unity is not that. The real unity is outcomes that you guys describe. How do we get there? And help me with some of these words. So BIPOC, what's in that?
Yeah, I mean, you just asked two really, really good questions, and I can totally speak to both if you're happy to hear my opinion on it. So the first thing is that I find it really interesting that you brought up sort of the ivory tower ideology of sort of the university thing that seems to be driving what the sort of social justice rooms are, which I am totally a part of. And I anecdotally have an interesting sort of experience with that, because when I was going through my undergraduate degree, I did feel like I was learning a new language in order to be able to talk about these concepts. And intersectionality is one of them that I was learning and learned. And now it's sort of like the definition feels like very rigid and sort of just this concept that is really important, but it's still just like a concept. It's like this far off idea. But what we've been doing tonight, and started by Joe and continued sort of by Rich, is using intersectionality as a concept more like a verb, and deciding, I guess, to move toward the understanding, like using it as a verb to understand our differences in order to create unity. And so, I mean, that's kind of how I see it. Like we need to use language to move forward and create the unity, and things like intersectionality allow us to understand the complexities of each individual's identifiers, group identifiers. I mean, Rich mentioned class, like that's a huge one. We talk about class all the time.
So it applies to me, like intersectionality applies to me too, like
you have intersecting identities. How you identify is intersectional.
Okay.
Does that make sense? So
yeah, it does. I would just assume it doesn't, right? Like when somebody says that and they say, hey, Chris, you may not understand intersectionality and everything. I'm just assuming that means maybe as a white male, or as a 39-year-old, or somebody from my socioeconomic background or something. It doesn't apply to me. But what you're saying is intersectionality applies to everyone. In fact, this is something that is the most common thing amongst people. More or less.
You just identified like who you are in three simple ways, and how those identifiers come to become you. That's your intersectional identity.
Wow.
So so like being white, being whatever age, being whatever
freak
from a hillbilly background.
Yeah, like all
being your own uniqueness.
Is just the concept to describe how your identity is complex, basically. So
yeah, we've got to find, there's got to be an effort on all of our part to find commonality, and it's just, there's such a, I don't know if it's like there's so many factors, I suppose, that lead to an American, especially, but a human in this world today, being unable to do that. First of all, so many would be unable to even think about doing it. And if you went and asked them to do it, they would give you the finger possibly, or like, I don't know, they'd wrap you in like a don't tread on me flag and kick you down some stairs or something. But, there's got to be why wouldn't they be able to? First of all, why don't they know about it? And if they do know about it and we were to ask them to do it, those folks, why wouldn't they want to find commonality? What's advantageous about not finding commonality and of finding a way to agree on things in this country and to coexist? Mm-hmm. Why is that so advantageous? Because people are choosing to do that instead.
Right. There's a wonderful answer I think I might have for this. And Chris, you mentioned this word, and I hope you understand how prescient that word actually is and how it's going to relate to what I'm going to say next. The word is language. The word is language. Now, Kat and I, of course, we did an entire episode on language, and one of my master's degrees, obviously, it was partially focused on healthcare, but it also focused on linguistics, and more specifically, healthcare interpreting. And interpreting goes through a cyclical process of receiving a signal, decoding a signal, and recoding a signal. That way you can understand interlingual communication between people who do not speak your language. So the reason why more people aren't practicing this sort of unity is quite honestly a lack of communication. Now, there are barriers to communication. One of the barriers to communication is simply not understanding the language. Another barrier to communication is apprehension. You just don't want to talk to somebody for whatever fears you might have. Mm-hmm. Another barrier to communication is ignorance. You just don't know. So rather than, as Jackie Robinson said, you would rather be quiet and be thought of as a fool instead of opening your mouth and removing all doubt. So there are barriers to communication that prevent people from beginning to understand. And the communication barrier, it comes from a variety of walls that have been set up and built around our social structures to prevent that sort of unity from happening. I've said this in a previous conversation a while before. What we need to do is build more windows and doors rather than walls. Because when we build more windows and doors rather than walls, we're able to see what is happening. We can see the commonalities through social and biological identifiers, otherwise known as racial characteristics. And we can then figure out, oh, you know what? Yeah, you are a lot like me. So let me dig in a little for about another 45 seconds or so, because let's take a look at the people that stormed the Capitol building, 33 or 34 days ago. There's a whole lot that many of those people had in common. Not necessarily people that went into the building and took Nancy Pelosi's laptop and took selfies on the floor of the Capitol building, but there were a whole lot of people that were walking the streets of Constitution Avenue and Independence Avenue right near the Capitol building that had a whole lot in common with a lot of Black people in the United States, because they realize that they are also being screwed by the government. The only difference between the Black people in Black Lives Matter and the white people that stormed the Capitol building, or at least marched on the Capitol building, is white privilege. Those white people were saying, hey, you know what? I get to do whatever I want because I'm white. Black people fight for the same stuff in addition to equal rights and human rights, and then Black people get beat up by the police. So there's, again, the intersectionality, and I've said this on a bunch of occasions, racism is a function of economics. Racism is a function of economics. So much of the divide that we see in the United States, yes, it is Black and white. But historically speaking, where did the Black and white divide in the United States come from? It came through enslaving Africans. Why did white colonialists enslave Africans? A labor source. What is labor? Labor is a part of economics. So I think people need to understand that unfortunately, the situation in the United States is black versus white, but that quite honestly is the wrong fight. What the fight is billionaire oligarchs versus it's the 1% versus the 99%. And I think the sooner people understand black, white, non-gender conforming, whomever, wherever, whatever, that if you understand that there's a bunch of people that live in their ivory towers, or as a New York Times writer referred to as Richistan, where they're completely divorced and removed from the day-to-day struggles of the 99%, the sooner that people understand that we, the people, the workers of this country, and in your instance, Canada, are being oppressed by oligarchs that don't give two shits about the people they're oppressing, the sooner that we stop fighting each other and look at the people that we are fighting, then that is where we need to point our attention.
Right.
But at this point right now, what we have are individual wolves that are not fighting as a pack. And a wolf by itself is enough to deal with, but you can deal with a wolf. But if you deal with a pack of wolves is a force that needs to be reckoned with.
Right.
It's no different than, one more thing. I know many of us have watched more than our share of Bruce Lee movies. And Bruce Lee was just this physical anomaly that raised his physical and mental and spiritual body to a higher plane that we could never imagine. And he came up with something called the 1-inch punch. And he would literally punch you with a finger. Now, when you think about how isolating one finger is, you're not supposed to generate that amount of force to knock over a person with one punch, with one finger. But what you do is if you make a fist and you punch, you're going to generate a whole lot more force and make a whole lot more impact. And right now, what we have right in society are individual fingers that are not operating as a fist. What I would like to see happen more of is less fingers and more fists. We got to get our hands together. We got to get our hands dirty, and we have to work. You can't climb the ladder of success with your hands in your pockets.
Right. Well, I had to hold myself back. I wanted to jump in and get dirty about it with you there. And I think we do need to continue this conversation, and specifically around ignorance is the one that really stuck out to me, because, what is it that people need to learn? What is it that we need to educate them on in order for what you just described to come to pass? Because something's blocking it. But I wanted to say hello to Rue. Rue, we're so glad you made it.
I'm so glad to make it as well. Thanks for having me, even though it was, burning. I'm terrible with cliches, burning the candle at both.
Yeah, you're working your ass off. I hear you. Yep. Well, we really appreciate you coming and joining us. And we defined intersectionality a little earlier and unity as well. And we're looking for, where do they meet? Where do they intersect? And I don't know if feel free to, what do you think about it? You got any thoughts? Have you thought about it?
Yeah, well, yeah, I guess about the intersection of intersectionality and unity, right?
Yeah.
I guess when I think unity has been all the buzzword, and I don't know if I'm repeating a lot of the things that y'all said before I was able to join, but unity is like definitely, the buzzword. And I think the word that people are using and espousing as a way of making it seem like there is any possibility that we can forget the horrendous hell that many of us have had to experience in this country, and that there is a possibility that we would be able to get over it. And by get over it, I mean those of us who've had to experience it, and of course those things like racism and sexism and homophobia and all of these things, defining unity is kind of like, oh, well, people will be able to like forget that those things happened, or they'll be able to they'll be able to accept apologies for the fact that those things have happened. And in a lot of ways, my thoughts around a lot of these conversations about unity are really like, when do we tap into the people who have sort of caused the break in the first place?
Sure.
How do we tap into people who need unity are the ones who need to understand the oppression that many of us have had to experience. And I know that there's like so many different layers to that, but I've been hearing it like, oh, we should unify with the people who stormed the Capitol. We should, they want to do these deep dives into all of these like, QAnon folks. Like, let's just find out what they're thinking. Maybe we can, we can build some unity. And it's like, okay, is that what we have to? Is that where the intersection of peace and unity exists, is in like most of us just actually rolling over so that these people who have believed these insane things and done these insane things, that we can, make them feel better about their actions? Is that unity? And that's where I struggle with the intersection of unity and peace, or even comparing intersectionality and unity, because like, I don't necessarily want to unify with people who want me dead,
Sure.
And that's why there's like so many layers to that, right? Because for me, like the most obvious one is like, okay, the intersectionality between like racism and social justice and like whatever. But I'm also talking about like, as a Black woman, what the intersectionality and unity between like Black women and Black men, particularly cis heterosexual Black men, like we're not always on the same page either. We're not always, we might be Black, but we don't necessarily think the same things about the same things. So I think it's really complicated, and there's so many layers to it that I also am always thinking about all the time. Like how are we, how am I as, a Black woman confronting homophobia or transphobia, and as like, a cis woman, how am I stepping up and making sure that I'm a part of the conversations that don't contribute to transphobia, and that's really a lot where my mind is too. And I think because we could beat racism to death with a dead horse. Like, I don't know, I'm terrible with cliches.
We could beat it with a dead horse. I don't mind. I'll beat it with anything.
I would love to do that. Really.
Yeah, whatever it is. But where we really also have to get into a lot of these conversations also is like, homophobia and transphobia, and how all of that still stems from like misogyny, which we can't solve issues of race often without having to look at misogyny and then the intersection of like racism and religion, and how like a lot of like Christian, no offense to anyone of course, but a lot of like Christian rhetoric is like building blocks and breeding grounds for like white supremacy, so there's just a lot of things that I feel like that can intersect, but that make it difficult to still unify. And I also, in my last thought on this is, I don't know if understanding the intersections, if that means that we have to unify, and that's not really like a popular opinion, because I think most people think that like we should figure out a way to just coexist and live together and be nice and like all of that shit. But I just don't think that historically there's anything that shows that we might actually ever get there. So.
I think that's prolific, Rue. Like the whole package was, but until tonight, I didn't know intersectionality applied to me. Like it applies to everything. And listening to you, it's like a walking almanac. Like for those of you that have not took an opportunity to listen to Rue, I mean, in what you just said, there were so many words that I would be willing to say that 75% of the United States do not understand what they mean. Like, even misogyny, right? Which of course it's going to be me, a guy who's saying that we don't understand misogyny, but it's one of those things that, there's the textbook definition, just like Richard started the show off. And then there's the actual definition, like cisgendered, for instance, express these things. And I think a lot of it's fear, right? So like, let's say I was dressed up in the finest of NASCAR gear and I walked into the NASCAR arena with the glossary of terms that I've heard tonight and that were defined so eloquently. I think that even with all my NASCAR gear on, which I don't have for the record, it would not be enough for when I started reading these words where people felt almost like incompetent, like on accident, for not understanding what some of these words are. So right away,
Right.
before we're even addressing,
That's scary.
it is. It's very scary. It's very scary. Like, and if it wasn't for people like those of you on this, I don't think there's that many people that don't ask the question, right? Like, I would feel like if I were to go, oh, Rue, what does cisgendered mean? And the only reason I know this is because I've asked the question before. And I think that people would feel like, am I offending you asking that? So first, is it offensive if you don't know what a word means to ask it? And is there an appropriate way to do that where it doesn't start off a conversation in a very bad way?
I think that's a good question. And there are people who are going to feel different ways about this. And I'm curious to see, what everyone else thinks too. Because it's hard for me to answer because I have this kind of like overarching policy where I don't like textbook teach like anti-racism necessarily because I'm Black, right? So I got time. Like if you have questions about race and whatever, we can discuss race, but I'm not going to sit down and like tell and explain, it was kind of reminds me of last year when Juneteenth was all the rage in the media and like so many people were like, oh, I've never heard of Juneteenth. And I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Did you say that last year?
Yeah, it's really ridiculous. Like, okay, I'm not going to explain to you Juneteenth. You can read up on some culture that's not your own, and you would have been known about Juneteenth, honestly. But also, I also understand that not everyone's going to know, and there does need to be someone who explains it. So yes, there is a fair amount of like answering of questions, but I also think that like if we're in a conversation, I say cisgender, or I say transphobia, or I talk about the intersection, or I say. This is a big one is like misogynoir, which is basically like the active misogyny of Black men against Black women. That's a new term. Like this woman, Trudy, created that term like 3 years ago. So those kind of things, I'm open to those discussions. And I think it can come out however you want. But what I don't do is engage in like, just like, hey, Black people, what do you guys think about this? Or like one thing that I think happens to me, and I'm not trying to like beat on Black men, but I feel like this is on my mind because it has like happened recently. But like Black men will do a lot of this weird shit like, well, why do I have to accept, a man that thinks they're a woman? And like, that's the shit I don't have time for because I feel like I would just like, like, I don't know that. You don't want to know the answer. You don't want to.
Well,
you don't want to
Amazing.
I am gonna just take a second here because I like was gonna jump in a few different points and it takes me back to kind of the ignorance concept and I think I just have been imagining, and I've been doing this a long time. I may have mentioned it on the show before. I imagine the country that we live in, the nation that has goals that we can agree upon in our politics. That this is like part of what we want is a nation that doesn't fight each other and that can be prosperous and have freedom, as they say the United States is built upon, and be the best if that's the goal. And so, really, I think why are we not communicating about and educating? Why is the country itself like? How do we get our country to have just a little bit of that money that they blow every day out the window towards like a national education, like that goes out on the web and on social media and on the television? I mean, I know we're like afraid that the government's going to like start to like manipulate us through some sort of means of like media. And I think we always have been, but it would be nice if they like positively manipulated the country into learning shit, maybe about our history or about the Constitution, but definitely about each other, and about how, like, if there's a problem with racism, then why does the United States of America not have a program that's against racism? And how is it that, media sources that say that they're against racism and companies who say that they're against racism, why is it that there is not some sort of system in place and effort to like really be combating that ignorance? And making it cool. I don't know, whatever. Let's get creative.
I think what they do is they make laws, right? So they make protected classes and they're like, hey, listen, now a law's in place. We got it covered. A law's in place. The court system will solve it. But that's not really how practical society works. You know, if you have to drag somebody through the court system to get things done, it'll never happen. I watched the battle they did in Denver City Council, right? To make a lot of logical, positive moves forward. They had the money to do certain things and all this. And to see the kind of arguments that were presented against it was kind of embarrassing, right? I live in the same country too, right? So like, I don't want to see that. And I think that that's the biggest problem is that when we present these things, what we're also admitting is that we've been doing something wrong this whole time. So when we present this glossary and we do a program against racism, what'll end up happening, they'll say things like, remember the last time we did this? And Ebonics, we tried to make Ebonics something that solved the problem of racism in America. That's literally come out of somebody in Washington, D.C.'s mouth sometime or another. And what it is there's never, I learned this from one of the greatest leaders that I've learned in recovery. There's never too many times to recover, right? And same thing for our society. So I'm down to figure out why we are missing something in society. But I think it starts with the language where people don't feel ignorant from the jump, because nobody likes to enter into a conversation. You know, they always say you don't want to be the smartest person in the room. You don't want to be the dumbest one in the room either. And nobody that we associate is never really the dumbest one in a room. But the simple fact of the matter is some people just don't know what they don't know. And I think baby steps matter. And that's why conversations like this, I think, go so much farther than some law that's created in an ivory tower in finding out practical application and examples of how you can go into a NASCAR.
So I'm going to, something tells me that, you know, and Kat, you can speak on this too, but I think Joe, maybe practical applications. I mean, maybe like, let's get weird. Let's get creative, imaginative. What the hell can this country do? What can the institutions do? What can we do? Let's make it cool to educate ourselves around this bullshit that's hard and sucks. You know?
Can I just say?
Oh,
Kat, before we go on? Yeah, I mean, obviously, Joe and Kat chats, we're about education. We love defining terms so that people understand them. But one thing that's really just glaring at me right now with this conversation is power and the power dynamics involved in our society.
Yes.
Because we, like, in the example of using racism and anti-racism work, racism is built on economic exploitation of Black people in America, particularly. And the people with power are upholding these systems and institutions and basically the colonial legacy of colonialism with our government structure, with all of our cultural norms, with the policies and practices we have. So that makes us want to fight amongst each other, Black and white, you know? And it facilitates the infighting, or, you know, societal, social, cultural fighting. But what I really want to express here is that when we're talking about power dynamics, it is up to the person with power to educate themselves. And that's what people are missing here, because racism is not, I said it last time, racism is not the problem of Black people or Indigenous folks or people of color. Racism is a white person's problem. We're the ones that have to take responsibility for the shit we've done in the past.
Yeah.
And,
I've been learning that.
You know, educate ourselves. Of course. Ask your friends.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
Right.
Only because it sticks to me like in such an interesting way, because that what you just said is the answer to like this whole thing. In my opinion, like, why can't we make it cool? Why isn't there a national mandate that says like, don't be a dick and don't be racist? Well, like, the only problem is that some people, I listened to the city council group living amendment last night, and they were literally talking about white flight, like in 2021. And that is not going to be solved by like a national mandate. That's going to be solved by white people unifying against racism, and they have to do it on their own because they have that power and that structure. Sorry, Joe. Go ahead.
Yeah, no doubt.
But it's in the best interest of white people to not do that. And that is where this divide happens.
Well, maybe we
have unity.
Maybe it is. Maybe it can be. I don't personally think
that's what's changing. I think that's what's changing. And I think a lot of things are evidence of it, right? I love seeing the big reaction. the big reaction when you see people stumble, they're like, maybe if we change our marketing strategy, that'll help us. Well, so be it. Those little things, even if it's done accidental, at least cause something that happens and gets talked about. And I've learned a lot from this, especially from Rue, right? We work in a similar industry at some point, and, Rue's a representative of something real, right? I want to see real action, not just conversation. And, I'm sitting here and it's a matter of like, damn, I'm looking around. I'm like, are we able to actually do real action? And, that's one of the big challenges. Is like, it's one thing to want to do real things. And it's another thing to have the means to do real things, but then not knowing what is something real that's measurable that does make an impact in this is, I think, where a lot of people are lost. Brands are lost. People are lost. I live in a town where I can walk outside. I mean, I wouldn't call it a town. I live on a block in the desert, and I can walk outside and I don't see evidence of racism, but I also don't see evidence of unity, because I see evidence of really nothing. So just because there's not evidence of racism doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Just like if there's not evidence of unity, doesn't mean it doesn't exist either. And I think that it's important for us to figure out where people can go and actually see real evidence of unity, because that's where it all begins. It's not stock imagery. And I love Jonah and the artwork that was made for this show. And I think, and we made a point here, a lot of people go online, they're doing a marketing campaign, they'll get the stock image. It'll be two hands, a black person, a white person hugging, all this jubilation. Is that unity? I don't think so, but I promise you somewhere out there it exists. So help me find where to look.
It's the closest thing that kind of comes to our like subconscious mind. I think we imagine that, and maybe we need to imagine something different. We all four of us just kind of like snagged it from you, Joe, but you're being very patient.
Hey,
I have to say, like, I'm just like I need to put it in my calendar, like make sure I'm tuning into what Joe's thinking at some point today.
I'm a patient brother. I'm a patient brother, and I appreciate everyone's contributions here. And this is something that I've said before, and I'm going to continue to repeat. America needs a cultural autopsy. America needs a cultural autopsy. What we need to do is to take a look at the institutions that predictably produce Karens and these Boogaloo boys, these 3%ers, whoever. Because again, nobody comes out of the womb as a racist. Racism is a learned behavior. 402 years ago, a group of Portuguese and Spanish people just didn't wake up and say, hey, you know what? Let's go ahead and enslave some Africans and let's make them do all of our work. Nobody did that. It was a learned behavior. So what I would like to see happen, because if you can have a study for salmon and making sure that salmon continue to reproduce in the Pacific Northwest, or you can have a study to figure out why there's lead in the water. You can damn sure have a study to figure out why there are these racist organizations and why Karens exist. So what needs to happen, again, a cultural autopsy of these institutions. And quite honestly, for every monument that we have in the United States that is supposed to be a representation of liberty, we need to have monuments that are a reminder of what a racist country the United States is. That's what needs to actually happen.
That was where my head was at a minute ago too.
Because again, and one of my favorite props, and no one even say it's a prop, but people have seen this before. This is the United States Constitution. And again, Black people didn't get anything.
You literally just have a copy of that sitting there.
I actually got one too. You inspired me.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh my God. I appreciate that.
Boom. Well, thank you, bro.
Again,
I know you have a reason not to have one, Kat, but
Black people didn't get anything until down here on the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution. So one of the policy points that I've consistently said in order to truly rewrite and redo everything in this country is to rewrite the United States Constitution. And right after that, reparations for American descendants of enslaved Africans.
Hold on, let me stop you right there. Okay.
Fire away. Yes.
Because I have heard you say that, and man, it's a dream. I feel like I know, but I guess what I'm saying, I'm trying to like conceptualize in my own strategy, because this is we're getting this done. I don't give a shit. We're gonna do it. The five of us, all of us.
You're gonna get the Constitution rewritten
now. See, there's just levels, So like, I'm just curious if
put it on my dream board.
I'm curious if like how if that's like maybe maybe that goes down in the 30s, right? 2030s. Now we're rewriting the Constitution 10 years from now. What do we need to do immediately that's a little bit more attainable, perhaps, that can then allow us to rewrite the Constitution in the 30s?
And there is already stuff on the books right now. HR 40, pass that. How about passing HR 40? How about passing the Voting Rights Act to make sure that Black people and white people have the same opportunities to express their 15th, 19th, 23rd, and 26th Amendment rights? How about passing the Equality Act to make sure our LGBTQIA plus brothers and sisters have the same rights as straight people in the United States? There are plenty of opportunities for the government to enact policies that create equality and equity, and you can't change a racist mind. It's difficult to change a racist mind, but what you can do is change a racist policy. And what we have right here is a governing document that is that upholds racism and white supremacy. If we change this, there's a better chance of changing the cultural institutions that predictably reproduce racists and white supremacists and bigots.
That's powerful.
Yeah, that is powerful.
Yes.
And I will say, I saw a tweet the other day, and I can't remember who it was by, but it was something along the lines of like, we have enough studies. Like, we know people in poverty, like, get out of poverty when you give them money. And I was like, duh, we have enough studies for all of this shit. We are upholding these systems because that's the system that we are born and learned about, and we uphold them because that's what we're told life is like. And the people with power, like I said before, they're the ones that are responsible for it, and it's in your best interest, if you have power, to keep it. So when we're talking about rewriting the Constitution, I absolutely think we should, but the people in power have to be willing to do that, and they're not yet.
Or we have to figure out how to take the power back from the people in power, and or build a powerful structure enough that we can hold ourselves equal, and I think that not that any of us, like, I feel like, in America, even within the Democrats, it's like the progressives or the Democrats or whatever, but I do feel like one thing that the Red movement has that us, like, progressive, liberal, Democrat, whatever, the opposite of red is, what we don't have is that unity and that absolute willingness to go all the way to the end to
so maybe that's what we need. Maybe that's what we're missing.
Well, it is,
maybe,
but we can't rewrite. Like,
we gotta go blurple.
You asked what? No, we don't need to go blurple.
No blurple?
I got rid of my red hat. I just
you
out the door.
Do incrementally before we rewrite the Constitution. In order for us to do that, we have to get on the same page. Okay, well, how do we get on the same page? Like, are you it's not like, are you a Bernie Sanders? Are you a Elizabeth Warren? Like, it's not that. It's like, are you willing to just shut the fuck up about things that matter less to you than the bigger picture, so that we can all come together and, like, win incrementally? And that's the unity that I'm interested in. I'm willing to shut the fuck up about certain things that matter less to me, but maybe are just like things that, are like, whatever. I'm like, okay, I can shut up about, barring the playing of This Is How We Do It. If you love that song, that's fine. Okay. If that
better not bar it.
Get on the same page.
I like the song.
Go, then we can rewrite the Constitution. But we can't do it because we don't have enough power and we don't have enough people. And the reason why we don't is because people are racist and insane. So
I would say look at HR 40. I would say, could I say HR 40? I just looked at it. I knew a little bit about it. Mm-hmm. I think that's actually a reasonable thing. And I was a Republican strategist coming from the other side. Yep. It's a study to look at, listen, are we culpable? If we did a study on 9/11 to determine the culpability of it, I certainly think we should be able to do a commission and study on whether or not orchestrated or individual
Now we're talking.
slavery enriching philosophy back in the day was right or wrong, and who's responsible, and then determine, hey, just like you would in business, I know this sounds crazy, to stop all the people talking shit, here's how much it would cost and how we solve it.
We need like an opposite J. Edgar Hoover. You know what I mean? Like somebody who's just so insanely
What is that book,
focused on
Joe?
something. Oh yeah, what do you got?
Well, this book right here speaks to what you talked about, Chris. Again, HR 40 was that commission. This book, From Here to Equality, by Sandy Darity and A. Kirsten Mullen, discusses reparations for Black Americans in the 21st century. I urge everybody to go ahead and read this book. And if you're an educator, teacher, professor, scholar, whomever, wherever, whatever, in any sort of institution, get this for your students. If you got kids, pick this up for them, read it to them. And if this is maybe developmentally inappropriate because you have a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old, read it to them anyway, because it's this sort of education that our young people need in order to begin that cultural autopsy, so they understand that, you know what, hey, there's inequalities baked into the legal and judicial system of the United States and in our social institutions that make up our society. And how do we get rid of them? This book is maybe the best book that I've ever read regarding how to deal with the inequalities, and that has an actual plan to execute on the ideals, aims, and wishes of House Resolution 40. So From Here to Equality, read this book. Please pick it up, especially chapter 13. And in this book, Dr. Darity talks about a way to resolve the reparations situation through a framework called ARC, Acknowledgement, Redress, Closure. Acknowledgement, yep, we made a mistake. We got an issue here. Redress, how can we make this right? Closure, are you happy with the terms of the redress? Are you happy with, can we move forward with this agreement? Acknowledgement, redress, closure. And that framework of ARC, and when you talk about redress, it comes through two parts. It comes through atonement and restitution. Atonement and restitution. And there are various ways to achieve atonement and restitution. Acknowledgement, redress, closure. If you look at, quite honestly, every single problem that we have structurally in the United States through that framework, not only just reparations, but, you know, police violence. How do we deal? Let's figure out can we deal with racism that way? Probably, because, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we made a mistake. We killed a Black person in the street. That's wrong. How do we make sure that we set up systems so we don't do this again? Let's not do this again. There's systems that are involved in this, and I quote unquote hate bringing up Joe and Kat Chat's previous episodes, but we actually did an entire episode on how to not be a Karen. And there's an entire 60-minute episode.
You can plug the Joe and Kat Chats anytime you'd like. I got a whole overlay ready.
Thank
Just
you.
let me know.
And
how not to become the next name either. How to not become a Chris. And let's.
And there's an entire episode where we talked about, we actually gave, I guess, durable solutions to, hey, you know what? Hey, here's how you don't want to be another Barbecue Becky or Corner Store in Caroline. But we gave.
I need a list of all the names.
Yeah.
For anyone that's naming a child, we're just going to give you the list right away.
I think that Joe's making some of those up because I've never heard of Corner Store Caroline.
Thank you, Rue. I was about to say, the people right now are calling the county offices, changing their kids'
I've
names.
never heard that one before. I will need to check some references.
Barbecue Becky, Corner Store Caroline. Yeah.
I think she was.
That
she
sounds like a Bruce Springsteen song.
Becky was in Lake Merritt in Oakland.
Okay, I love that place.
I love Joe Nice, man. I don't
know if that's true. Can we get a fact check?
It's true now, bro. It's out to the whole world. There's going to be a story tomorrow about poor Caroline at the corner. People that were Caroline today that went to the corner store, they are shitting themselves at home.
I don't know if it was barbecue. I don't know.
It was a barbecue that a bunch of Black folks were having in Lake Merritt.
Let me see. Barbecue. What would you say, Becky?
Barbecue Becky.
To all my friends named Becky that barbecued this weekend.
Oh, wow.
Stay social distance. Fear not.
Okay.
So
I remember, of course, because she had the phone, but I didn't know that they did call
Central Park Ann.
I'm pretty sure all you guys got computers in front of you while we're doing this. So, we could just, somebody needs to get on Google duty. Okay. You're in timeout. You report back while we're live here. What was that? What was the name of the policy that you mentioned, Chris? That you
HR 40.
So I'm going to just say that I've been thinking about it. And actually a guy came up to me on the street in Brooklyn on New Year's when I took my one step out of my house. And he asked me if I was into that idea, a black man. And I was really into the idea of talking about it. He ended up being one of those kind of like folks on the street who like, it's just really hard to communicate with them. And they seem to be really upset about something all day. So it ended up being like not the right conversation, but I mean, not to say, it just wasn't, I wasn't able to click. It wasn't able to like make sense. But right away when you mentioned it today, and then obviously after hearing Joe explain it, when we go back to the idea of the bigger picture issues that we have all been just seeing our whole lives, and it's just like drilling into our heads, and we just want these things to budge and to be fixed. I think that this makes sense to me. I think that it could really domino into a lot of things happening in this country that are not today, that would start to solve a lot of our issues, and would start to open us up to, what did you call it? The autopsy, the overhaul show?
I said a cultural autopsy.
Oh, I got it right. Okay.
Cultural
You know what? If anything, right, I think that it's malpractice at the government level if we don't look in and don't give an answer and don't present options for resolution, because you can't have something like the bill is not for like once it's passed and everything that reparations happen the next day. This would literally stop the conversation of the unknown, which is the most scary thing for anybody that's fighting the battle for equality and to stopping systemic racism. Is there ever going to be something that makes up for the past? It's one thing to stop the future, but the past causes a lot of the problems that continue to persist into the future. So HR 40 is something that I think is within reach. And I think, for all the people out there that would be against it, I think it's going to be a very hard argument. How could you be against researching something when we put a commission together to study the benefits of digitally printed pizza?
Yep. Real quick, Chris, and I want to say something here, and I hope everybody understands what I'm going to say next and which way we're going to go with this. Organizations like the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People should not exist in this country. I want to make sure everybody understood what I just said. The NAACP should not exist in this country. Why? Because you shouldn't need an organization that fights for the advancement of colored people when the governing document of our United States says that all men are created equal. We shouldn't be living in a country that, and again, Kat and I, again, on this entire month of Joe and Kat Chats, we're talking about Black History Month and important Black people, quite honestly, civil rights heroes. We should not have a need for civil rights heroes, because if everybody treated everybody equally and fairly, there wouldn't be a group of people from the oppressed group that are fighting for the rights of the oppressed group against the oppressing group. So again, this is a failure of government, Chris, as you so eloquently and perfectly said, because if the government was truly serving all people, if the government was truly doing the greatest number of good for the greatest number of people, we wouldn't need organizations. For example, one of my master's degrees is in nonprofit management. And the older I get, I'm realizing the ineffectiveness of nonprofits, because nonprofits are outsourced government agencies. If government was doing what they were supposed to be doing, you wouldn't need nonprofits. And I
gotta say, I've heard a lot about nonprofits over the past few years being this thing that like you can go and do as a business person to like get some money or like say some money, or it's like you could totally get into the nonprofit
with
game.
That hip language that you're trying to use to sell in, that would stop it. No, but Joe, I think you bring up a very powerful point. Like, I think that we spend a lot of time postulating, right? As a society, we go through the motions. We do the ceremony. Let's hire somebody to change the diversity and inclusion policies. Let's do what everyone else is doing. And I think that just like you said, I think there are things out there that hurt the fight more than anything else. What ended up happening? This would be this is my idiocracy. If they gamify the solutions of things like racism. Let's give somebody a blue ribbon because they weren't racist to their neighbor today. And the more blue ribbons you get, you can actually go get. That's where we go when we become an incentivized, driven society only. When what we need to do is, it's not about motivating people. People should be motivated enough. For hundreds of years, you should have been motivated enough to stop the atrocities. Everybody back in their family, one or the other, faced some atrocity. Nobody anywhere near to the plight of what would be considered our ancestors, and what has happened with people from African continent. It's atrocious, but it doesn't change the fact that it requires a first step. And HR 40 makes a lot of sense. Right. If anything, it would. I would argue that helping. I think writing a good. Rue is very good at one of the organizations he's with. Puts out all of these very simple marketing pieces that really break down some of the things that were going on in city council and everything in Denver. And I live in Las Vegas, and I follow Denver City Council because those documents made it interesting to me. And I think some of the points that Joe brought up tonight and everything, and some of the things that are out there, these actionable steps that we can take, starting with not doing the token activities that we feel we're supposed to do.
Sure. Like
the list of no-nos that everybody thinks is the list of yeses. Right. I think we live in a world now where we're all grown up enough to look at the list of no's, so people stop doing a bunch of fake yeses. Agreed. So I'm down with whatever team it is to say, hey, listen, here's a bunch of fake things. And when you do a bunch of fake things, people know. And then here's a bunch of easier things that may even cost less, that move in the right direction. I think that's an appropriate step that we should take as a society.
Right. And Chris, one thing that I want to make sure that I add to what you just said, I don't think people shouldn't be motivated to do this. Okay. Because people should be inspired to do this.
It's a better word.
But it's a more applicable word too, Reg. Thank you. Because motivation, the root word of motivation is motive. And whenever you have a motive to do something, there is a beginning and an end. But what happens when it is over? You just go back to whatever your regularly scheduled programming is. People should be inspired to do this because the root word of inspiration is spirit. Where does the spirit end? Where does the spirit begin? It should be something that's bigger than you, that comes from inside, that makes you want to live a better life. It should be something that comes from inside that makes you want to live and make sure that people around you can become the best versions of themselves without infringing upon their ability to become the best versions of themselves. It's not about motivation. People should be inspired to do this. So when I talked about diversity and inclusion about 45 minutes ago, those just can't be buzzwords that are cool in February because it's Black History Month. But the minute the calendar turns over to March 1st, everybody forgets about it and we go back to reincorporating glass ceilings against Black people. This is about inspiration. It is about living these values, not just doing these values because it's the next cool thing to do. So it's not about motivation. It's about inspiration.
Inspiration is motivation with heart. That's what I just kind of took away from that. When you mentioned motivation to start, that was a good thing because I was like, I don't really like that word. Like, don't try to motivate me. But then you took it right into the inspiration and kind of how that, maybe it's better, I suppose, is what you were framing. And that's what I think it's missing. Or maybe motivation can have heart, but inspiration definitely does. You're inspired to do something different than what you're doing. What do you need inspiration for if it's not to do something that you're not doing? And so I love putting that in there. And I really love, I want to say I love all you guys and you inspire me, that's for sure. To make sure I don't click the wrong buttons while I'm doing this broadcast.
Well, thank you for having me on in this conversation. I feel that I got so many questions answered today, and I feel like confident enough to repeat the stuff to the point where I don't feel embarrassed that I didn't know it before. Good. So I thank you all. That's baby steps, but it matters. I promise.
No, it matters. It's really great. I love the conversation.
Me too.
So I think we're at the point where we can wind it down. We can round it out. Does anyone feel like any final, like, maybe not final thoughts, but what could we kind of run through together here to kind of round out what we've learned today? Maybe is that what teachers ask children? Let's talk about what we learned in class today.
Right.
I guess, like, for me, it would be like finding commonality agreeing on these things so that we can then enforce those things and make them a part of this future with policies and binding agreements.
Agreed.
So maybe we need to find ways to work together, agree together as disparate groups in this country, because I think we know we can't really expect a whole lot to get done in Washington and in the government and with the laws necessarily. I mean, we got to fight for that too. But like, I feel like there needs, when I think about the 60s revolution and some of the troubles that they had there, but also some of the successes, like there really were lots of different groups that came together to protest and lots of different groups that came together to find commonality. And that's essentially how the March on Washington was established in the first place. And so it's time, you know, I'm back to Occupy 2021. I just switched over Occupy 2020's Facebook group to 2021. I mean, it's cold right now, but it's going to get warm and we got to get out there. And I think we got to get out there with a little more purpose and vision and intersectionality. And it's interesting to think about. Like for me, it's like it could happen every year. It should happen every year. It has almost been, but it's always been, oh yeah, let's just talk about it. The pundits are like, oh yeah, the that protest. But no, this needs to be a movement for sure. Maybe it is.
Well, I think having shows like this make it happen. I was just answering some of the questions and comments that I got through this. And I think there's a lot of people out there that kind of felt like I didn't know things. And I think y'all made them feel better. So I'm excited to be on the show again, Richard, anytime that I can. It's such a learning experience, but more importantly, I just feel cool. Like when I get done watching the Joe and Kat combo shows.
Thank you.
All right. I mean, I think we're kind of at the last word. So I'm gonna crock those were ours. So that leaves three of you left. I like putting the hot seat on us all, like randomly. It's like, oh, here it is. Time ding. Oh.
Yeah, I guess I'll just say thank you as well because I mean, these conversations are really important and they facilitate understanding, and I love that. And I mean, there's these issues that we're talking about are really complex. We're never gonna, solve them completely, but I think digging into the difficult parts of it, because we can't have unity without recognizing the intersectionality of the diversity and the complexity of our lives and our society and cultural influences on that. And differences are part of life. And so you can't have unity without recognizing them, whether we put them aside or not. So thank you again. I appreciate all of you.
Same. I always enjoy this conversation and the opportunities to meld our minds. So thank you guys so much. I'm excited for next time.
This was fresh as usual. Earlier today, Kat and I filmed episode 35 of Joe and Kat Chat series, and it involved Black people in music. And we talked about a variety of musicians. And when there's a song that I listened to earlier today, it wasn't going to be part of the discussion, but it's a song by the OJs, the mighty, mighty OJs. And the name of the song is called Put Our Heads Together. The hook of the song says, put our heads together. Let's start, come on, and get on the move. Put our love together. We've got to get on the move. The second verse of the song says, hold on. We've got to sacrifice for the children to see a much better life, because our hopes and dreams depend on what's in their minds. Don't ignore the call. It's time to organize. Tonight's conversation boils down to putting our heads together. Putting our heads together is what intersectionality is supposed to be. And the OJs also had another song. I think it was on another album afterwards. And the name of the song is called Love Train. And Eddie Levert got on the microphone. He said, people all over the world,
I love this song.
join hands, start a love train. And we're here on the Fear and Loving podcast. And as I said earlier on in today's conversation, and today's podcast with my sister Kat, I said that the best of music, especially in the Black tradition. It informs people. It expresses emotions. It tells a story, but it's rooted in the deepest of all human emotions. And the deepest of all human emotions is love. And that is what I hope our messages were transmitted to the people tonight. It comes from a place of love, not fear.
Thank you, guys. And I'm going to wrap it with one of my poems real quick that I had planned for this episode. And we'll see you next month. Joe's Rue, you're out of here? Okay. And we will see you next month for our next episode, episode 10. The next topic, the energy of dissolution, how to dismantle and recreate institutions. And you can find us at Real Fear and Loving. And links to the YouTube or in the event info, please go and subscribe. And thank you to Chris, Foltz, Joe Nice, Cat Wells, and Rue Johnson squad. It's good stuff. Yeah, it was good. It was good tonight. We got to go back and rewatch this one, I think. You know what I mean? All right. This is Forever Right Now. I am certain that living is never certain, and there may never be another chance to say that, to do this, or to dance. There is no reserved seat for us upon future's flight, no vessel or means to go back even for a moment. So while we are still privileged enough to experience the alchemy of the consciousness soul, really all that we need to know is that this is it. And yet, when I think of making a choice devoid of languid laziness or future fear, I feel all their eyes upon me, embarrassed to speak mind talk, the honest heart love, those timid or unchanging souls stuck in the momentum of the past, constantly getting ready for tomorrow. You can wait and wait to never pursue promptly the turning point of a life lived, dictated by your true vision, forever, right now. Anything possible. Do not retreat from big moments. Just continue getting timely things done. We can't procrastinate or forward the unknown's phone calls or ignore the unknown's emails. The unknown is all we have to take for granted. Mandated to not waste time. Our brief moment in the sun. It is better to risk your deepest feels than to die with them. Breathe that brevity and hold nothing real back. Enjoy the riches that you have. Damn. Love you guys. Thank you so much. Fear and Loving with Ranch. We'll be back every Tuesday. Second Tuesday, excuse me, guys. Every second Tuesday of the month, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. One love. Thanks.